We ask you to help us, we ask you to guide us, we ask you to give us your glory and give us an everything to be our glory, to be our let us glorify his grace and even his blessings and everything that we do. We ask you to help us, we ask you to guide us. We ask you to make this event a successful one. We ask you to give us the utmost remembrance for us to remember everything that have been taught here today and help us to achieve greatness from this class and every activities we'll be holding in the future. So, thank you for everything. You pray for your guidance and you pray for your guidance and everything. Thank you for everything that you will do for us beyond the future, for now, the present, tomorrow, and for the future. We ask to guide us and we ask to guide us. Guide us and guide us to the right path. We use your story and everything that we do. Lord, I guide us and our glory and peace and give us the honor and give us the blessings that we do and everything that will give us the power to achieve greatness. Greatness beyond what people would do. Greatness beyond what everybody would infinitely achieve. Give us everything that will give us guidance and everything that will protect us. Give us and everything that will do. Oh Lord, in God's name we've prayed.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Mariam, for that. And again, hello everyone. You're welcome to today's session on behalf of our CEO and founder, Dana Wilson. We are very grateful and very happy to have you here today. And we just hope that today's session is informative for you. And so before we get into the meat of today's session, I will just take some time to introduce our speaker in the person of Blessing. And Blessing, I don't know if you can turn on your video so we can see you while I introduce you to our community.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Oh, you look so good.
Please.
Thank you.
Okay. So happy to have you here, Blessing. So just give me 1 second. So I guess maybe while we wait, Blessing, if you could just sort of like tell us some of the expectations you have for today and what you hope everybody could get out of today's session.
Yeah, sure. Let me see. So for today, I really want my session to be interactive. I think for one thing, it's one thing to learn, theory and just like reading books and listening to someone, but it's another thing to learn through like participation and asking questions, things like that. So I've made my presentation quite interactive. So hopefully you all can join in, ask questions, give your feedback, things like that. And I would say the one thing I would want you to take away from the session is, on one hand, I want to, I guess, demystify what people think UI or UX is, and making it a bit more attainable for you. Because for me, as you'll hear in my story, I kind of fell into UX. I didn't really plan for it. I didn't do any courses. I didn't do any, certifications for it. It just kind of fell into my lap. So I want to share with you, how I was able to enter the world of UX and everything.
Great. Thank you so much. And we're really excited to hear that. And so for those who might not know Blessing, Blessing is a global citizen. She's lived in Nigeria, she's lived in Germany, she's lived in Scotland, and she's lived in the United States. So I'm sure as time goes on, we'll see exactly how all of those different perspectives have shaped who she is today and also how she approaches her career as well. She's an ardent creative that leverages the digital world with grit and with grace, and an adherent believer in the power of storytelling. One of the things that Blessing believes is that stories and experiences pave the path that enhances a person's pursuit of opportunity. And in her current role as a UX product manager at Microsoft, she's able to leverage this diverse background in order to influence the cross-cultural design of the products that she works on. And so, Blessing, we're very grateful to have you here today. Very excited to hear from you. And I'll just hand over to you now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join me here to learn a bit about UX. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. There might be some background noise. There's a graduation party happening behind me, so hopefully that won't disrupt too much. But let's get into it. So as I said, my name is Blessing. I wanted to give a few fun facts about me just so that you can get to know me as well. And then, of course, this should be reciprocal. So I would love to get to know you as well. So if you feel comfortable, please, open your camera, let me see your faces so that I know I'm not just talking to blank screens. And then also, if you can put in the chats one fun fact about you. So one fun fact about me is that I love puff puff. I currently have a plate here of, Nigerian delicacies. I have puff puff, jollof rice, suya, plantain, fried rice.
That's the whole package.
Everything. I love puff puff. I can have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, any day. I also play 5 instruments. I don't know if you can see behind me here. I have a keyboard. I also play the guitar, ukulele, clarinet, and violin. I learned most of the instruments I play through YouTube University. I taught myself. And then I'm also currently writing a book. I started in 2020. So it's been 2 years, still writing. Hopefully soon it can, come out. It will be published, but writing a book isn't easy, but it's definitely a learning process. So I'm excited to be on it. And then lastly, I started the initiative called Students of LinkedIn in 2018. If any of you have heard of the hashtag or have seen the hashtag, it was basically an initiative that I started when I was in my second year of university. Didn't see many students on LinkedIn, and I started to be on LinkedIn more. And I said, hey, I want to see more students utilizing the platform. And so I created this initiative to help to educate students about LinkedIn and how they can actually use the platform to get jobs, to get scholarships, internships, build a personal brand, and everything like that. So that's a bit about me. I don't know. I'm checking the chat now to see if anyone has added any fun facts about themselves. But please, if you haven't, let me see some of your fun facts.
I love baking. That's what I
love baking.
Yes.
Ooh, that's exciting. Yeah, I like baking as well. Actually, I like eating. I like eating. Anyone else? You can just type it in the chat. Okay, someone loves puff puff like me.
Yes.
I said I'll fight for fried plantains.
I like that. Fried plantain. You like food, not really eating. Okay, 100% pepper lover. I wish I could say the same, but I'll just stay away from that one. All right. Okay, let's get into this. So I wanted to start off by talking a bit about my journey just in general with life, and then my education journey as well, just to give you some background of how UX kind of fell into my lap, but how I was also able to use my life and my education experiences to help me in that field. So I was born in Nigeria. By the age of 2, my family relocated to Germany, where I grew up. I grew up speaking German, and then shortly after, I moved to the UK, specifically in Scotland, where I spent the majority of my life until the senior year. So my last year of high school in Scotland, my family relocated to the United States, and so did I. So I had to start my whole, journey afresh here, finishing high school and then looking to go into university. So I came to the US in 2015, and coming from Scotland, all I'd known when it comes to technology was that, you know, if you want to be in the technology industry, you should have a computer science background. There wasn't software engineering, there wasn't information systems, there wasn't like digital media, it was just computer science. So when I came to the US, I said, okay, well, computer science is all I know, so let me pursue that. Let me pursue that in university. So I started as a computer science student, and I think towards the second half of the year, I said, hey, I don't like coding. It's not for me. And so I switched to software engineering because I felt that it was a bit, to me, like it was more project based. And I said, okay, I want to do more projects and stuff like that. So I switched to software engineering, still realized that, okay, it was still, you know, quite coding intensive. And so finally, I switched to information systems, where I found that, okay, information systems is a mix of technology and business. And I felt like I had interests and passions in both aspects that I could kind of join together. So at the end of my first year, I said, okay, I'm an information systems major, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do because information systems is already very broad. And so I said, you know, coming to the US, I didn't have scholarships or savings because my family moved very abruptly. Within like 3 months, we moved to the US. So I didn't have any plans for pursuing higher education here, but also I didn't have any savings to help me. But I knew that if I'm spending so many thousands of dollars in the US to, you know, go to school and all of that stuff, then I want to make sure that by the time I graduate, by the time I leave, I have a better idea of what I wanted to do. And I knew that just going to classes and having theoretical, you know, knowledge wouldn't be enough. So I said, okay, I want to do internships however I can, whether it's official, whether it's unofficial, whether it's paid or unpaid. I wanted to do internships just to figure out what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. So as you can see, I have interned at quite a few companies and also in very different roles as well. So when I was doing my internship at the startup, I worked as a social business strategist. At Google, I was a software engineer. At Comcast, I was I think it was a business and data intelligence analyst. At Morgan Stanley, I was a business analyst. At Bloomberg, I was a data engineer. And at Microsoft, I was a backend program manager. So, you know, with all those things, I figured out what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And so I graduated last June. And I started my career at Microsoft as a UX product manager. So a bit about my role, because sometimes it's difficult to explain to people what I actually do. So as I mentioned, I work on the image experiences team on Bing Multimedia. For those that don't know what Bing is basically Microsoft's search engine. So it's equivalent to Google search engine. And I help to drive product experiences. I work with different teams like research teams, design teams, engineering, marketing, to try and come up with these, you know, interesting features that might excite and engage users. So an example that of a feature that my team worked on, not me personally, but here on the right, there's a screenshot of our image details page. And this is when, you know, if you go on Google and you're typing in an image and you actually click on the image, you see more details about that image. And so my team worked on this feature on the right called the looks like module, where it can recognize specific people, it can recognize food items, it can recognize animals, it can recognize plants in a specific image. So in this case, I didn't search for files. I didn't search for any of the actors or actresses here, but I just searched for Chief Daddy, which is a movie that came out, I think, a few years ago or just recently. And so this feature is able to recognize who's in the picture. So I found that kind of cool, and it gives you an idea of what my team kind of does. another thing I wanted to mention was that as a UX PM, one of the things I also work on is identifying things like this. So for example, as was mentioned, I was born in Nigeria, but then lived in Germany and in Scotland as well before coming to the US. And I found that there are different things that my background has helped me bring to the table, or has helped me to identify. So for example, this is the Microsoft Bing image search, and I typed in ogbono soup for anyone that knows what that is. And at the top, you can see a bar that has like ads, right? And you can see there's 3 examples I pointed out where it's showing you mushroom soup, it's showing you different canned soups, and then this hale and hearty soup. And, you know, for me, being born in Nigeria, coming from a Nigerian household, I can look at this screenshot and say, okay, wait, there's something that's not right here, because if an algorithm looks at, you know, the word ogbono and soup, it will now take the word soup and say, okay, well, let's push out adverts relating to soup. But of course, if you don't know anything about West Africa, if you don't know anything about the soup, you won't realize that what we say is soup in West Africa is not the same as, or Nigeria is not the same as what the Western world calls soup. So I'm able to kind of point things out like that. And that's something that I try to use to my advantage on this team, because I know I'm the only Nigerian, I know I'm the only person that has lived in Germany and in Scotland, so I'm able to filter everything that I do through my, I guess, like a cultural lens. So kind of going into the bulk of it, what is UX? So UX is how a user interacts with and experiences a product, a system, or a service. And I broke it down into around 4 more things. So one, the first thing is technology. And this looks at whether you're working with a mobile application, whether it's a website, a web application, or a desktop software. I made these clear because the UX and the UI is actually very different depending on the technology that you use. For example, if you're building a website for primarily like to be used on a laptop or a desktop, there are certain interactions that you have, like clicking or hovering, that you might have that you wouldn't have on a phone, because on a phone device, on a mobile device, you can't necessarily hover. It's more of like a swipe, click, that kind of thing. So you have to take those into consideration when you're thinking about perhaps going into the UX field. Is there a specific technology that interests you more than another? The next is user needs. So thinking about demographics, thinking about pain points, user goals, usability, the ease of whatever product, system, or service that you're working on, and also accessibility. So for example, at Bing, I am a accessibility champ for my team. So when we're building features and everything, we have to make sure that it meets our accessibility goals. So for example, if we're putting, let's say there's a button and it's a light blue color and the text is white, that's an accessibility issue because it's not very easy to see. So you also always have to take those things into consideration. The next one is business goals. So the core values of a specific product or team, conversion rates, retention, brand perception, and these are all things that you have to keep in mind when you're working on a product, system, or service, especially when it comes to UX. And later on, I'll show you a few examples where retention is actually important in how you think about the UX of a website. And then lastly, I kind of put a question mark because I think UX is still quite broad and it really depends on the team that you're working on. And as I said, it also depends on the technology, the business goals, and the user needs as well. So that last quadrant, I put research is important. You have to do user research, strategy. For me personally, as a product manager, I have to strategize a lot. I have to do a lot of testing. As a product manager as well, I do a lot of A/B testing. So making sure that, okay, users actually like what we're doing before pushing it out into production. And then design as well. whether that's low fidelity, so that could be as simple as just, some empty boxes and some text saying, okay, this is what this is supposed to be, this is a button, this is not. Or it could be high fidelity where you use softwares like Figma or Adobe XD to actually come up with something that's a bit more visually appealing. So a lot of people, even me starting off, I had the question of, okay, what actually is the difference between UI and UX? And so hopefully after this and some other examples I show you, you'll be able to get a better understanding of what the actual difference is. But they do intersect. That's something I wanted to point out. So the UI, the user interface, refers to the screens, the buttons, toggles, icons, and other like visual elements of a website or an app that you're working on. But the UX refers to the entire interaction that you have with a specific product, including how a user actually feels about that interaction. So you can see how they kind of intersect. And then breaking it down even more, UX revolves around the purpose and the functionality of the product, whereas UI focuses on the quality of the user's interaction with the products. Now, again, UX involves the components such as market research. As I mentioned, you do a lot of research, understanding user needs, but then in UI, it's more about having an artistic design for the components product or service. And then lastly, UX focuses on the overall project management. As I mentioned, I'm a product management, but still the, going through ideation, development, and the delivery of a specific feature or of a specific website or product that you're working on. Whereas UI, it focuses on the actual design of the finished product. How does it look to the user? So hopefully that helps. There's also something that I did yesterday. It was a video that I created of I guess like a mock design that I was working on. And so I'll play it once and then I'll explain what I want you to do. Okay. All right. So there are two things I wanted to point out about this. I actually did a poll on Instagram yesterday where I asked my followers, I guess, what software I used to create this. The majority of people thought I used Adobe XD. Then second in ranking was Figma, and then the least amount of people chose Microsoft PowerPoint. I actually used Microsoft PowerPoint for this. And something that I wanted to point out here is that a lot of people think that, oh, if I want to go into UI or if I want to go into UX, I need to have this, brand, software that you have to pay, so much money for. But, there's also something like Microsoft Word that you can, use. I think for me, it's just how you are able to manipulate different things. And as you can see, I was able to recreate this image using Microsoft PowerPoint. So it's just basic text boxes, cropping, you're able to actually use Microsoft PowerPoint to do what you want. But again, I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to UI, UX, they think it can only be Figma, it can only be Adobe XD, it can only be these, great softwares that a lot of people use. But there's a software right under your nose, Microsoft PowerPoint, that could do just as equally great work. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point out. The second thing I wanted to ask, based on the past few slides where I asked about the difference between, or where I talked about the difference between UI and UX, in this specific frame, I wanted to ask you to put in the chat, what do you think the UI element of the screenshot is? I'll give it a few minutes or a few seconds, and then I'll kind of walk through what I'm trying to point out here. So remember, UX is icons, it's buttons, it's toggles, it's the visual aspect of a specific feature or a specific aspect of a website. I'll play the video one more time, and then by the end of the video, if there's no messages or if there's nothing in the chat, then I can just explain. Also, don't feel like you have to get the, question correct. Like, just brainstorm with me, just put what you think, because we're all here to learn. So okay. All right, I'm seeing some comments, so I'll just go back to this frame. Let's see. All right, I'll stop it here. Okay, so I'm seeing the background. Okay, I'm seeing the colors picked, the background, placement of icons, where the icons are located, name, picture, font of the text, font alignments. All of those are correct. That's the UI. Yeah, the UI is the finished product. Yeah, exactly. So first I'll start with the UI. Yep, the UI is the share and the all images button. Also the icons for the Instagram logo and the Facebook logo. The UI also includes the typography of, or the font of my name, of every text that you see on the screen. Basically, it's the image that I put, it's the color background. That's what UI is. As Georgette mentioned, the UX is about, sharing the info about myself. The UX also includes, okay, what happens when I click on share? What happens when I click on all images? What happens when are these buttons clickable? If I click on Facebook, does that take me to Blessings Facebook? Is there any other interaction? So for example, if this was to be on a website, as you can see, if I click on it, it goes through this like carousel of other cards like that. That is also part of the UX. It's how I experience this thing that I'm putting on my website. So thank you for engaging with me. I hope that helps you to understand a bit more about the differences between UI and UX. Some qualities as well that I've kind of learned and I've acquired as a UX PM, and also bringing my like global perspective into it as well. As I mentioned earlier, it's helped me to think about problems differently. As I mentioned with the whole ogbono soup example, I look at that and I see that, okay, there's actually something wrong with this. Someone else who doesn't know anything about Nigeria or ogbono soup or anything like that will look at that same screenshot and think that it's fine, So it's helped me to filter things through a different lens. Something as a UX PM as well is that you have to know how to tell stories. Again, as we mentioned, user experience is how a user experiences a product or a feature or a website. And so you have to be able to tell stories about the user. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of like user personas, but when you're in the beginning stages of like a website or anything like that, you create user personas to say, okay, this is, this middle-aged woman who has 3 kids, and you build a persona about this person and then talk about how that person would experience this specific website or this specific product. And I think it helps to have customer or user empathy as well, because again, if I'm building a website for the older generation, it can't be the same they can't have the same experience as what the younger generation would have, because there's certain things that are more intuitive to us, especially using social media with swipes and stories and things like that, that the older generation might not understand as well. So that's just something that I wanted to point out there. So kind of going into, okay, how can I actually, start my journey in UX? One of the things is to do research. I think research is such a crucial skill to have, not just in preparing yourself to be in the UX field, but also when you're in the UX field as well. So one way that you can do your research is to learn from industry experts, whether that's through conferences about UX. Adobe always holds, these large conferences about UX, and there are other organizations that do that as well. Learning from industry experts, learning about new trends that are going on. I'm also speaking with UX professionals. You can search on LinkedIn, UX designers, UX researchers, UI designers. There are so many types of roles within the UI UX field that you can kind of just broaden your horizon, so you can understand what it is that you actually want to do within UX and what it is that you don't want to do within UX. And as kind of based on that, learning about the different aspects of UX, right? Thinking about what characteristics interest you. And I think when you break it down into, okay, this is UX and these are the different characteristics that come under UX, then it helps you to build the skill for it. So for example, research. You don't need to be in UX to know how to research. You can research whether it's in a project that you're doing in school or a personal project that you have at home, or you're doing an internship. There are different characteristics that you do outside of the field of UX that you can bring into the field. And then kind of going into that, looking at job roles and descriptions and understanding the skills are actually needed. So even if you're not in a position to apply for a UX field right now, you can just search, UX research, UX design, and look at the skills that are needed for the job and see how perhaps something in the past you've done actually will help you apply for this role, or if there's something that you can start doing now, whether it's analysis, whether it's user research, whether it's design, that you can start to practice now, that can help you for that UX job that you want to apply for. Also, another thing is you have to start becoming curious about the world of design. Now that I've been in my role for, I think, just up to 10 months now, everything that I look at, every app, every website, every product, I'm looking at it from a place of design. Like, oh, why did they place this button here? Why, when I think I'm supposed to swipe, it doesn't swipe? I have to start thinking about that, because what I see other people do also helps me in my own work. Like, oh, there's this new interaction that I saw on this website. That would be cool, to bring back to my team. And then also asking questions on forums and platforms. As I mentioned, LinkedIn, there's also, of course, this platform that we're on, and different community groups with UX professionals that you can ask questions to, and also just other people that are learning to, or that want to go into the field of UX. The next one would be getting experience. So as I mentioned, looking at things from a lens of design or from a lens of UI or UX, you can get experience. It doesn't just have to be an internship. And just because you don't have an internship doesn't mean that, there's nothing I can put on my resume. There's nothing that I can really say I've done in an interview. There's so many other things that you can do. One of them being building a case study. So you can look at improving existing systems or websites or services. Let's say there's a website that you went on that you think you could improve. And it doesn't mean you have to do this whole design project. It could just be, as I mentioned, low fidelity. It could just be like you writing on a piece of paper, okay, maybe this button should have gone here. Maybe this is how this interaction should be. And you build a case study so you yourself test what you know, but something that you can also showcase online to say, hey, this is a website that I was looking at and this is how I would go about improving it. It's also something that you can use when you're in an interview and they say, what have you done in the world of UX? And even if you didn't have an internship, you can say, yeah, I've built a few case studies and that have helped to improve this specific website or this specific system. And then, as I mentioned, you can also play around with design softwares like Figma, also Microsoft PowerPoint. Honestly, I don't have Figma. I've never used Figma. I've never used Adobe XD, because at first for me it was the money. I said, hey, I'm not in that field. I don't have money like that to be spending it on that software. And then two, it was, back then I wasn't really focused on UI, UX or anything design like that. So for years now, I've just been using Microsoft PowerPoint to just manipulate different things. So that's where you can start. You can start small. You can see a website, take a screenshot, put it in one slide, and create another slide and try to replicate it. That's something that you can just learn. You can learn about the buttons, you can learn about the experience, and just play around with it like that. And then I would also say, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an internship, whether it's paid or unpaid. I would say getting a job working for someone else, maybe not for the sake of money, but also just for experience. You can, let's say if a friend has a website or a blog, you could say, hey, could I actually just, use your platform to try and to build my own personal project to try and better it. And through that, you're able to gain experience, and then you learn how to create a user experience, not necessarily for yourself and through what you think a user would really like, but you have this larger body that can help put you in the right direction. So we're going to go into this interactive activity. I have a few slides of this, and basically how this is going to work. I want you to choose to look at the screenshot on the right and to choose which side, number 1 or number 2, is better. And then you could also type, why do you think it's better? So I'll give a few minutes for that. And then I'll give you the answer and share what I think. And I want you to think about this from a place of UI and UX. So again, UI is typography, it's color scheme, it's icon placement, it's buttons, it's toggles. UX is the experience, how a user actually experiences it, not just by clicking on things, but also by looking at it. You put yourself in the seat of a user. You're looking at this. What are thoughts that come to your mind? All right, because of time, I'll kind of just look at the chat right now. So I'm seeing quite a few ones, some 2s. Let's see what people said. For number 1, it's centered. Okay, the image is centered and there's less wording. So looking for the price, it was hard to find in the second one. Okay. Number 2 is too busy. The plus sign makes it easier. Okay. 2 as a user is better. I think number 1 is better. The product is centered. The plus sign on 1 is vague. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for participating. So I think everyone gave valid reasons. And again, there's not necessarily just one correct answer. What I'll share is just what I'm thinking. Because again, a lot of these things you have to think about from a place of business goals, as I mentioned before. You have to think of the technology. You have to think of user needs as well. So it also, factor those things in as well. So I chose number 2. I said that the experience here is clear. The user knows what is being sold. It's the succulent plant. You see the image on the left, how much is being sold for. You see it right next to the image, and the action button is clear, leaving no ambiguity. So I know someone mentioned that the plus sign is ambiguous. Now for me, I agreed with that point on number 1, because the plus sign, does that mean that you're adding it to the cart? Does that mean that you're increasing the quantity? Are you buying 2 succulent plants if you click on that? So it kind of depends that way. And yeah, for 2, as I mentioned, it's clear that when I click add to cart, it should now add that succulent plant to my cart. I do understand that people prefer the product image to be centered, which does make sense. But again, that's one of those things where it's not just number 2 that's correct. There are certain things that you can take and put into other places. All right, next one. Which one is better? Number 1 or number 2, and why? Okay, so number 2 is better. Number 2, because it gives you both options. Number 2, there's a missing action button on number 1. Okay. The more options, the better. Okay, more people are saying number 2. 1, call to action is clear. Yep, the red color. The action. Number 2, because it shows both options. The red font on number 1 is a bit aggressive. Yep. Okay. All right. Ivan, you mentioned a good point, which is what I'll go into now as well. So I picked number 2, assuming that a business goal is to retain customers. I said that number 2 would be better because it encourages people to change to the free plan, and which will help to retain customers instead of just allowing a customer to cancel their subscription completely. And it leaves room for opportunity. The one thing that I perhaps do like about number 1 though is that the red color, though it can seem aggressive and like in your face, it's still good to, I don't know if you've ever seen on like other applications where if it's something to like delete or to cancel something, it's bold because they want you to know that, listen, if you click on this button, it's gone, So with number 2, it's a bit more, a bit more, I don't know, like seamless, like you don't really notice it that much. But imagine if the cancel subscription button on number 1 was without the red color. Anyone could just, slight move of a button, they'll click it and they didn't realize that, they just canceled their entire subscription. So yeah, I chose number 2 because, as people have mentioned, there are more options. And if we want to think about it from a place of business goals and retaining customers, then number 2 would be better. All right, thank you everyone. Last one. Which one is better, number 1 or number 2? Okay, people are saying 2. 2 is better. You get to see the info for longer compared to 1. That's a good point. 1, because 2 gives the assumption that your item is shipped right away. Okay. Okay, so more people chose to provide the next step. Okay. Gives more info on the order, the number 1. All right. So I also chose number 2. I said that the experience shows that it values the customer by acknowledging their purchase, giving them, so it values their customer by saying, thank you for your trust. 2, by acknowledging their purchase. So, payment received, your order is now on the way. And then also, as I mentioned, giving them an update on progress and next steps. So, next steps, please check your email for the receipt. The thing about number 1 that I would say is that the 3 seconds isn't clear what will happen. Will the page close down? Will it take me to my email? Will it take me to the receipt? Like it doesn't tell you what is going to happen. So the 3 seconds experience, I guess, or UI element is UI. And the experience of what happens next is what a UX professional will think about. And yeah, let me see what else people have said. Number 2, it offers more information on where to go for extra information. Number 2, for someone who needs to submit the receipt. Yeah, I agree. Number 2. And I think again, when you look at like business goals and things like that, or business values, maybe a value is that the business wants to build trust with the customer. So having this specific wording, thanks for your trust, that is, I think it's a mix of UX and UI, but generally, if you're working on this, you have to think about that. And again, everything that's related to UI and UX, you have to filter it from a place of what are user needs, what are business goals. Like it encompasses a lot of things. So don't think that if you want to go into UI and UX, you're just designing for the sake of designing. You have to think about all of these things in the back of your mind, especially with whatever you're building. So one of the things to do as well as you begin your journey in UX is to keep updated with trends. You could do this passively, you could do this actively, but what I mean by this is just, as I mentioned, trying to look at things from a lens of UI UX. Like, okay, there's this, if you notice as well with like logos of companies and organizations, at one point in time, logos were very like 3D, like they were very 3D, you could see there were a lot of details, right? But now a lot of logos are very like flat, like very 2D, don't have too many details, few colors, that kind of thing. So just keeping an eye out for things like that. Another thing that a lot of companies are now trying to do is personalization. That's a hot topic. It's hard to do, but it's something that people realize that users value, especially if you have Netflix, if you have Spotify, if you have Instagram, when things are recommended to you based on your searches or based on the things that you've typed in or things that you've liked, you realize that that's user experience. And so, yeah, even on social media, you can follow pages, you can follow hashtags, just to keep you updated with different things that are happening in the UX world. Another thing that I would say, it's not a mandatory thing, but something that could help to build an online presence, whether that's related to UX or outside of that. I think it helps to find a platform, whether that's LinkedIn, Behance is this massive creator platform for creators, or Instagram or any other platform that you find, leveraging that to kind of talk to UX professionals, to ask questions, to put your own content out there. As I mentioned, your case studies and questions that you have, that's a platform that you can put out there. I think it's important to, know how to establish your presence, realizing that, everyone comes with their own experiences, and that helps to better a product, it helps to build a product. And so remembering that even if you don't know anything about UX, even if you haven't read all of the books, or even if you don't have a certification, there's something about your own background and about your own experience that can help you challenge something that's already been done, or it can help you birth something that hasn't even started yet. And then the last thing I put was to actually share what you know, even if it's little, even if it's just a question that you have. It's important to put it out there, because through that, you learn, and then people on the other end, they realize that, okay, this person is actually interested in UI or is actually interested in UX. Because at the end of the day, you can take all these certifications, you can take all of these courses and be this great UI UX guru, but if no one knows you, if no one knows what you can do, then where does that take you? So it's important that as you're learning, you're also pouring back out to other people, because even if there's a tiny bit that there's someone that knows a lot less than you. So as you pour it out, you're also pouring into other people, but you're also letting your followers, you're also letting the world know that, okay, this person is interested in UX. And it helps to build your brand in that field as well, that even when you're looking for a job, it's not that, oh, out of the blue, Blessing is now coming out to say that, oh, apparently she likes, she likes UX. But through time, I've been building content, I've been asking questions, I've been talking to people about UX. So it will come to a point where when you're really looking for a job, you have people to ask, like, oh, I spoke to you a few months ago asking you questions about your role. I'm actually looking for a job right now. Could you help me out? That kind of thing. And then lastly, getting familiar with resources. As I mentioned, YouTube is a great resource. Even if you can't afford a course, even if you can't, if you don't have access to a course, YouTube is a great place to just see how other people do things. As I mentioned, online courses, books as well, personal experiences. And then there's 2 websites I put at the bottom, UX Matters and Interaction Design Foundation, where you can learn more about like UX principles, different things are happening in the world now as well. And then, as I mentioned, there's all these softwares, specifically PowerPoint. I will say, if you want to not get too overwhelmed by, you know, all of the things with Figma, if you're used to using PowerPoint, you can start there by trying to just manipulate different things. So I added a free resource, which is this book, The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. I read it when I was in university, and it helps a lot to break down, you know, the different aspects of UX and just examples of mistakes that people have made in the past through, you know, the different UI elements that they've put or the user experiences that they have on websites. It helps to break it down. So you can either, there's a link at the bottom that you can just type into your browser, or you can use your phone to scan that QR code, and then it should take you to the PDF of this book. But definitely recommend reading it, even if it's not cover to cover. You can just look at some of the chapters that might interest you. So I know we're getting close to time, but just wanted to give you some key takeaways that you can leave here with. So one, I really want everyone on this call to actually believe in themselves and to leverage the different perspectives that they bring to the table. As I mentioned, UX, I didn't plan to be in UX. You know, I've moved to different countries all my life. I have switched, you know, my course of study in university many times. I've had so many different roles, but I definitely believe that every single one of those aspects of my story has helped to, you know, make an impact in my role right now at Microsoft. Second, I want to say is that you have to put the theory to practice. It's great to do all these courses and certifications and say, yes, I have this, and put it on your resume. But if you get this job, you know, what are you showing for it? So you want to make sure that as you're learning about these things by reading books, by doing these online courses, you're also practicing it. And then through practicing it, you're also sharing it out to the world so that you can also get feedback from other people, what they think. Because again, user experience is not just about what you think is great, but the users that you're building for, will they actually like it? If I'm building a website for, you know, teenagers, and I think that, yeah, you know, I used to be a teenager and I know what they like and things like that. Now I give this website to them and no one knows how to use it. That's a problem. And then lastly, learn from and with people. You have to prepare yourself for the role you want. So it's important to, you know, take the perspectives of other people as well. Of course, you have a unique perspective, you have a different perspective, but again, user experience is about building empathy for the people around you and really understanding what their needs are. So, spoken a lot, but thank you for interacting with me. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I hope it's helped to give you a better understanding of what the UI UX world is like. And I know we have just around 5 minutes left, so I'm open to any questions, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Blessing. It was such a wonderful session. I got to learn a lot, and I'm sure everybody also got to learn a lot and a new thing or the other. So everyone, if you ask questions to ask Blessing, you can put it in the chat box, raise your hands to ask, and you can unmute. And you can also connect with Blessing via LinkedIn.
Yes. Any questions about my experience, about UX, about UI, about any of the examples that I showed, about the video, Microsoft PowerPoint? But yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah, Georgette, you have your hand up.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Blessing. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so my question is, how did you stand out in the applications concerning like internships and job applications?
So I want to say I know, but I don't know if I do know. I definitely know that my diverse experiences helped. In my internships, though my roles were very different, I was working mainly on like data teams. So I was able to kind of match that data background with like the creative aspect of things. Because as I mentioned in UX, it's not just can you design, it's about, okay, even if you didn't study business, do you know about businesses? Do you know about business strategies? Do you know about business management? Do you know about users? Do you know about research? So I think the one thing that helped me stand out is that I just had a diverse set of experiences, that people could say that, oh, okay, it doesn't matter what project I'm working on, even if it's a project that's specifically towards finance, there's something in my background that could help me with that. Do you get? So it's like just building a bank of different types of experiences as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's amazing.
Of course, no problem.
Yes, so there's a question in the chat box saying, what's the best part of your job?
The best part of my job, I would say, is two things. One, I would say manipulate things a lot. Like in the video that I showed you with like Microsoft PowerPoint, I get to do a lot of that because as a UX PM, I personally don't do the designs because I work with the design team, but I get to do mock-ups. So basically the mock versions of what the actual design would be. I get to do that, and I like doing that on Microsoft PowerPoint a lot. So I get to do that with all of the features that I've worked on. And then two, my team does a lot of experimentation, as I mentioned. In UX, you do a lot of testing, test things to the user. So I've done a lot of like A/B testing where I'm able to see, okay, users actually like this button being here, whereas there, or compared to there. So I think those are two aspects that I really like to do, or that are the best part of my job.
Another question from Morgan is, any recommendations for anyone that graduated during the pandemic and searching for new jobs in UX?
I would say one, definitely that online presence. And when I say online presence, it doesn't mean you have to have this big personal brand or this big following on LinkedIn. I just mean being more active online, whether that's asking questions, posting your thoughts, connecting with people where you get to have a chat with them, that kind of thing. And then also using whatever platform that you're on to share more about what you do as UX. I found that a lot of like companies, especially for the UX fields, they have a lot of remote jobs because it's a job that you don't necessarily need to be in an office for. So having an online presence is actually quite important to make sure that, in the digital scheme of things, you are there, people can see that you're there. So when it comes to searching for new jobs in UX, I would say, one, build that presence online, talk to people, post your thoughts, post your comments, and then also if you have a personal project that you're working on, share that online as well, because as that gets traction, as you talk to more people, then people know that, okay, this person is in UX, or oh, this person might be interested in this UX job that I saw.
So another question is that, would your slide be shared with us?
Yes, I can send you. Yeah, I can send you the slide.
Thank
and
you
there are also
much.
there are a few communities I'm part of as well. I think primarily on Facebook, and I can share the link to as well.
Oh, thank you very much. So can everybody go off on mute and say a very big thank you to Blessing?
Thank you, Blessing.
Thank you, Blessing.
Thank you, Blessing.
Thank you so much, Blessing. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me.